Greetings, Green Middle School historians. Today our topic is Civil War era photos. If you remember last time, we took a look at the idea that even though people really hoped that the war was going to be over quickly, that turned out not to be true. And as the war dragged on, there was lots of resistance to it, opposition to on the Union home front, as the excerpt from our text tells us here. Lots of protests, as you can see in the image, even became violent. And so this development of Civil War photographic technology affects the Civil War, and that's our target question. How did the development of photographic technology affect the Civil War? It is part of this developing opposition and pressure on the Union to actually bring it to a close. Photography first came to the US in 1839 with a system called the daguerreotype. So in 1839, the daguerreotype came, and as you can see from the image, it seems like quite a complex process, especially compared to the era of digital photography that we're used to with the smartphone. You can take a look at some of these parts and ingredients. It looks like some kind of scientific or chemistry experiment, right? Mad scientist type of stuff. And so basically what you would have is the use of different materials such as silver-plated copper and iodine to make a glass plate sensitive to light. And then you would develop the image, right? So whatever image that you pointed it towards, you develop that image using mercury vapor. And then when you had the image just the way you liked it, you would stop that process by washing it with a saline or a salt solution. So a pretty complex way to do it. And people use this new photography, this brand new technology, mainly for portraits. 95% of all daguerreotypes were portraits. So it seems like it almost became a continuation of the tradition of having your portrait painted by an artist, but now they were using the technology. People didn't use this for other purposes like now. You know, one of the most popular things to do with photographs is to take a picture of your dinner and post it to Instagram, but they didn't do that initially. So let's check for your understanding. Photography came to the US in A, B, C, or D. What do you think? The answer is 1839. Ding, 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 if you got that right. A few decades prior to the Civil War. Most photos were A, B, C, D. And the answer is ding, 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 portraits. One of the parts of a daguerreotype and the other camera technologies that we'll be talking about in a few minutes was something called the camera obscura. And a camera obscura is simply a darkened box with a lens, and that lens projects an image of some object outside of the box. So whatever you point it at, the light energy of that image goes into the box through a lens and reflects it in this box known as the camera obscura. And interestingly, this is actually a really big camera obscura in San Francisco at Ocean Beach, kind of a tourist attraction that you can visit. But it's a great example of how it works. Here's a diagram of it, where the object that they're looking at are these little islands out in the ocean there, and that image travels through the lens and then is projected down on this screen in the camera obscura. And this is actually what it would look like. So those islands that we saw out in the ocean are actually here. So if you had a treated glass plate here, that would create a photograph of it, right? A daguerreotype. The magic trick of early photography was, what was that really important part that all the early cameras had? A, iodine, B, camera obscura, C, mercury vapor, or D, a saline solution. What do you think? Yes, the camera obscura was really the magic trick. That was the basic way that these photographs were taken. Here are a couple of examples of some early daguerreotypes. And you can see that they are portraits. The next kind of technology developed was something called a tintype. And one of the important things to know is they reduced the price of photographs, so they became cheaper, and that way more people could afford them. They became more common. And then also they were less fragile. They were sturdier because they were not done on glass. They were done on metal, tin. That's a type of metal. And then the end result of that, of being cheaper and less fragile, is they could be sent in the mail. So people could send away for tintypes, right? Or they could be shipped once they had a tintype taken. Or people could send them home, like probably these two soldiers sent this tintype home to their families. Here's another example. So let's check the understanding about tinplates. Tinplates changed photography because photos were blank and blank and could be blanked. What do you think? Fill in the blanks there. Did you say cheaper? And they were less fragile, and that way they could be shipped? Very good. The last technology we're going to take a look at that really addresses our learning target is a technology called wet plates. Wet plates, actually you could take an original negative and turn it into as many prints as you wanted. You would actually could print them on paper. And so this actually, once again, made them really inexpensive, and you could send them anywhere, right? And have everywhere, have so many different photos. And so not only people had better access to them at home, but you could also publish them in newspapers and in magazines. And that's really what happened here, is that people had access to photos like never before. And more than that even, that they became much more portable. The actual technology became much more simple and easy to move around. And as you can see in this image, this is called Mathew Brady's photo wagon. Mathew Brady was one of the most famous photographers of the Civil War era. They would actually be able to put all their equipment in a photo wagon and go out into the world, right? And so what he and some other photographers started to do was they started going to Civil War battlefields. And when they would go to the Civil War battlefields, they would take battlefield photos. So the first time in history of the world, people, the public, people back home, the families of these soldiers, the loved ones of these soldiers, the friends of these soldiers could actually see these horrific images. They could actually see the horror of war firsthand in magazines, newspapers, or they would actually buy these photos. And this really did contribute to the opposition to the Civil War and the pressure on the Union government, on Lincoln and his commanders to somehow bring this long, horrible war to a close. So that's how this technology of Civil War photography contributed to Lincoln making some major decisions in the coming days that we'll study next. This was definitely one of the motivations for him. So just to check your understanding about that, the wet plate affected the Civil War because people back at home could see the blank of war and cause people to pressure the Union to blank the war. What do you think? The horror of war and to end the war. So next, you're actually going to show your understanding of our target question by writing a short response in a Schoology assignment. And that's all, folks. Thanks for joining me.